Welcome back to Cylance TV. I am Matt Stevenson with the legendary Scott Scheferman. You may remember Scott from a previous video where we talked about predictive advantage. When we were done, you were exhausted, I was exhausted, the audience was exhausted because there was so much going on. What has happened between now and then? Tell me what's happening with Cylance.
With Cylance, so here we are at PreventCon. This is our first ever conference we're having just for our users. Every vendor kind of gets to that stage if they're lucky enough, and we're lucky enough, and it's quite a conference here at the Ocean, beautiful setting. What's really happening is the family of Cylance that we call ourselves all the time is just expanding to all of our customer base. And ultimately, it's not us doing the selling anymore. It's not us doing the technical preaching, if you will. It's really our customers that are out there doing that. They're the ones fighting the fight. They're the ones now leaning forward. They're the ones actually getting stuff done that maybe they weren't able to prior to having a predictive, preventative, AI on their side, right? So those things are finally playing out in our customer base, and it's phenomenal.
Now you're not a marketing guy. You are a technician, an engineer. You are a scientist with this. What is it that Cylance does? We can all tell you, oh, we do this and that, but that's wrapping on a candy bar. You're the one that's in there with the guts of this stuff. What is Cylance doing that is so different, that is noteworthy compared to the industry?
That's an awesome question. So Cylance is one thing from the outside in, it's another thing from the inside out. And I live a lot of times in the white spaces of the org chart. So I like to talk to data science. I like to talk to our threat research group. I like to talk to our threat intelligence group. And we have many different groups inside Cylance, and the public may or may not even ever know about them. But magical things are happening, right? So one of the things that we're able to start doing now. Let me start over.
Sure.
Yeah. Sorry.
And I love the magical. I'm going to come back to the cliche about magic and science, and all science was magic. So love that.
Okay.
Just right after that part about going on is magical. Space.
Okay. I was trying to remember where I was going with it though. I had that brain fart. Let me see. Okay. So one of the things that's going on right now, internally, is there's a lot of dialogue about, okay, now that we have the core AI, the predictive AI that prevents portable executables from executing and does really well at that, and we've solved for that problem, what else can we start doing? And we have a lot of things going on, some of which people are fully aware of already, especially at the conference. Things like what we call persona, or aka identity. Continuous authentication is something we're really excited to bring to the market for many reasons. And then we're also doing a lot of things on the services side as well that involve machine learning, that involve big data, because what we're seeing in the industry now is that data is coming at us extremely fast, extremely voluminous. We know this, right? But never more than ever. And so one of the things we have a hard time in the industry as practitioners is getting our head around big data. And it's ironic that AI does a really good job with big data. So the more data that comes at us, the better the AI can get with more confidence and get more stuff done, right? Be able to take more autonomous decisions and take actions on our behalf, so that we can actually lean forward and do more strategic things, or proactively hunt in our environments for adversaries that might be targeting our vertical, etc. Right? So internally, there's a lot of magic going on. A lot of people say, I think of Cylance as it's like black magic, and I often say no, it's not magic, but it's certainly magical. In a lot of senses, that's where the predictive advantage story kind of came from. How are we actually able to anticipate entire threat campaign many months or years before it even rolls through and actually manifests itself in the real world? And to me, that still remains magical. That's one of the reasons I love getting up in the mornings. I know that the bad guys are having to completely re-engineer everything. They're going to have to spend a lot more money. They're going to have to think outside the box even more than they already do. Then they're going to take more risk, because they're going to have to get more intimate with the people, the targets they're attacking. So that actually presents risk to them, because now we're getting good at actually doing human attribution, authorship of code attribution. There's a lot of good research going on that internally here as well as in academia. And so the bad guys are starting to have to face this risk, and we are able to start applying math to help us get to that place where we can say, sorry, I wanted to stop myself because I didn't want to get towards attribution too far.
That's cool.
Yeah. Let me back that up, because we're not ready to tell that story yet. We haven't pivoted as an organization to get there yet.
Okay.
And that might confuse.
So we'll take it back to the point when you were talking about authentication and identity.
Can you stop all the way back?
Or do you want to do it? I mean, where do you want to pick? Because my thought was where you were going talking about the bad guys. The next question for me was going to be, we've talked a lot about Cylance disrupting on the on our side of things, on the security side, how do companies that really use AI, how do they disrupt the bad guys? What do the bad guys have to do differently now that they're facing this type of adversary? They're our adversary, but we're also theirs.
Interesting, yes.
And I can even frame it for you, it's like, I know you're a fact-based guy, you don't necessarily like to speculate, but on that side of things, they're going to have to react. What types of things do we need to be ready for next?
Okay. So should we just talk about that then? Okay. You'll cut and post. Sorry for all the post edits. Blah, blah, blah. Cut. So we've already seen the bad guys fully adapt to the fact that there's machine learning, predictive learning that can actually predict malware before it executes and stop it, because that broke the payload in so many kill chains, right? That we're all familiar with. All the spear phishing ones, all your drive-by browser stuff, everything, right? It all mostly depended on a payload. In fact, at 1% point in time, 95% of all attacks we were seeing was that. And so they've already shifted away from that, though, right? We've already forced their hand away from just a portable executable that gets to do whatever it wants to just because it ran, right? So get more creative. So obviously we've seen the emphasis on credentials, credential stuffing, reuse, and what's interesting about credentials is it actually brings us around to the part of the conversation where we start to talk about authentication. We think about what the word authentication actually means. I mean, knowing that I know that you are you. Right? So I established you as an identity, but how do I know that that identity is actually authorized to do what it's meant to do, and how do I do that continuously? And honestly, that's kind of one of the holy grails. It's not just get rid of passwords, so to speak, right? That's going to be huge for the human race when we achieve this. But what's even more interesting to me is that if you can solve the continuous authentication problem, like I might be able to log in right now with 2 factors that are not passwords one time and it create a session. But that's a one-time event that happens when I'm logging in. Mm-hmm. What about everything that's going on during that logged in session when the security stack is assuming that I'm still myself? That all the processes running as me as user are not becoming machine processes doing bad things that I'll never know about as a human being, right? So this continuous authentication actually ends up enabling a ton of things in business and in life. We were joking about cryptocurrency 10 minutes ago, but if you think about the impact when all of us will have wallets that are mobile on us that are all electronic based, I mean, you can argue that online banking is already here, right? But from a continuous auth standpoint, man, there's transactions in the blockchain that take a minute or two, right? You want to make sure that the authentication piece of that remains pure throughout the whole transaction. So and that's just free-flowing thought. Can't even talk about it. But, sorry.
Scott gets very excited about this stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, let's see what else with continuous auth. So. Okay, we'll bring it back to the kill chain. Let's see if I can do that. So, we were talking about the kill chain. If you put continuous auth into the kill chain, to know that the human with the belly button, so to speak, Bob, is not turned into a malicious process or into Sue, right? Both of those are really important questions to be able to answer. We have clients, for example, that have oil rigs out in the middle of the sea. And very low, not well manned, if you will, right? Very low resourced, and as a result, a lot of times they'll do things operationally like share passwords across with each other, right?
Yeah, just to make it easy.
And sometimes you need to do that. I come from 2 decades almost supporting the DoD and the warfighter, if you will, right? They have the same challenges. If you're on a submarine, or if you're in a battle situation, somebody gets shot. That doesn't mean that I need you to have the password. We have to share a password because I'm out of the equation all of a sudden, mm-hmm. right? So if I get shot. So continuous auth will allow us to do things like this where user A is at the terminal, gets shot. User B steps up to do something. The business continues to go and move forward, but I now know that B is the belly button behind the commands. And why is that important? Well, you talk about auditing. It's so interesting that when it came from the DO space to the commercial space, the word auditing is very seldom really talked about. Certainly not evangelized, but I think it's critical. The ability to know that we know that we know that this human being made that decision.
Yeah.
Right?
And not just about accountability, but to know that these are people and they're not bots or machines that are being put in there by the bad guys.
Right, exactly. And think about the non-repudiation aspects of that. If you log into a session at 12:30, and at 12:45 your process gets taken over maliciously and does something bad without you doing it as a human, you have the ability to repudiate that today. But if something bad happens at 12:45 and I know that it's you and it's not a machine, because I have massive amounts of confidence coming from tons of context around that, tons of AI, understanding who you are and how you move as a human being with your bioauthentication, that's very powerful. That will save us tons of money in legal fees. That'll shorten investigations tremendously. That'll play out when we have to go testify in court after post-event in instant response engagements, right?
Well, and it's not a draconian security lockdown either. It's protecting the users from people violating their processes as well. So,
and identifying the malicious ones that would otherwise be able to say it wasn't me.
Yeah. Now, I want to circle back to something you had mentioned in the beginning, what Cylance is doing, and you didn't use this word, and I hate this word, but disrupting the security industry. What's happening with authentication, that's the next big disruption we're looking to do, obviously, on our side of things. But how do the bad guys look at this stuff? You know, they're realizing, okay, they're beating my tricks now. They look at us as the adversary. So how are they treating us when they want to come after, you know, is it easier to just try to work around a security solution, or do these guys want to break it? Like, is there a source of pride? And I know you're a facts guy. Speculation, not one of your favorite things, but if you're thinking like a bad guy, you know, what are your steps?
And I'm not wearing a marketing hat, right? So,
sure.
You know, we'll just bear it out. The truth is, bad guys are completely trying to break us in particular, and every other machine learning type of defense there is right now. And they're very proactively doing that because they absolutely recognize the efficacy it's obtained, as well as the way it impedes their ability to make money really fast in the criminal environment or to do things subversively as a nation state. Right, so they have to attack the AI for what it's worth, because they know that we're also not stopping at portable executables. They know we're working on things like continuous auth. And when I say we, I don't just mean Cylance, I mean the whole industry, right? So the writing is interesting because we project what we're trying to do as an industry, as good guys, right? They don't project what they're going to do.
Yeah.
They will hold on to things like, we already know this, they'll hold on to a 0-day, and they could use it for 6 months. They might risk holding on to it before it gets patched because they don't want to burn it until they absolutely need to play that card.
Yep.
Right? So we already know their mindset is willing to be patient, not forecast, not project, not telegraph. So if you think about like martial arts and fighting, you don't want to telegraph, right? They're not telegraphing. We can't see their hips, if you will, and you can see mine.
Right.
Right? So that's one of the things that is going to become more interesting. Now, are they also trying to go around the second part of your question? Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's what that goes back to the conversation about credentials, and that's come out of necessity on their part as well. Not just opportunity, but also necessity. I mean, you ask our services team, our pen testers, and our red team, they will always go for creds first because it's the shortest path. And if that's somehow not available, and it almost always is anyway, if it's somehow, they'll go right to the user, the source of all the things, right? Creds are interesting, but the user's way more interesting because the user is already a trusted entity. It's a trusted identity. It authenticates itself for you as a bad guy. It puts in a second factor for you. It even requests a second factor over SMS. And you're sitting there with a SMS in the middle attack, and you grab the creds, and now I have your PayPal account.
Well, if you could take over their identity, that's putting on a costume where you can move as them, as opposed to I just have their key to get in the door, but I'm still me that's inside the building. I'm not them, as opposed to putting on their identity.
Yeah, it's like being a black wolf and a bunch of sheep, but you're wearing a perfectly perfect white sheep outfit. And you fit totally in. So, yeah.
So, Scott, you are prolific on LinkedIn. If people are out there looking for information from you, you've got good stuff every day. Tell the world. Scott, the world.
The world? Yes, I'm on LinkedIn. What do you want me to tell them?
Oh, well, there you go. I guess you can find Scott on LinkedIn. As always, you can find all the good stuff at threatvector.cylance.com. On the Twitter, we are at Cylance Inc. and at Cylance Insider. I am Matt Stevenson. You can find me at PacMatt73 on Twitter and on Instagram. And I have a line. So we always try to find Scott when he's available. Stick around.